Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the stream. Excuse me. I mixed up some flavor powder in my water and I kind of inhaled some by accident. Hi, Momo. Wow, you're getting on the stream early today. Ugh. Hmm. Yeah, the powder kind of can mess up my lungs sometimes. Anyway, we are back here in part 2 of the Warren High series on chapter 7. If you have missed any of the videos or you want to watch old ones, they are available on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/KibaAlunal, which I will post here in the chat at the bottom. So that way everyone can... Momo, I can't see through your butt. I'm sorry. I have my wallet in front of her. She wants to be able to sit down. youtube.com/KibaAlunal. There we go. You guys can visit there and check out previous videos and catch up if you like. You can also buy my books on Amazon. Behemoth, which was the first book that I read, is not available there, but um, Warren High as a series is available there. This is the latest book in the Warren High series. I unfortunately have not been able to write much of the third Warren High yet, but maybe we'll do that as a stream at some point. Just kind of sit with me while I write. Um, Maybe have some lo-fi music playing in the background. I know it's not very exciting if I'm not talking or interacting, but it's something, you know. So without further ado, Chapter 7. Reaching Laura's house, the two stood on the doorstep, wiping their feet of the damp and icy dew that had accumulated on their shoes. Laura led her friend inside their sanctuary from the winter. "Welcome back, hon," Laura's mother called out. "We have a guest," she called back. "Ned's staying the night tonight." "Hold it," Catherine ordered, causing the two to freeze as she came out of the kitchen. "Yes?" Laura asked sweetly, giving her mom her most innocent smile. "We need to have a talk. Now. Please excuse us, Ned." "Okay," he murmured, watching as the two went into another room. Once alone in the kitchen, her mother snapped at her in a hushed tone. "What are you thinking? Laura, you need to take his memories. Bringing him here is not okay." "I've already taken them, which I'm still not proud of. I feel like I betrayed him. I don't care what grandmother says. I'm never using my powers like that again." "Laura," she started, as if preparing to launch a full lecture. "Can we please just change the subject? Something seriously weird happened at Ned's house. Do you know if any of the major arcana are associated with fire?" Catherine frowned, crossing her arms over her chest and leaning against the kitchen counter. "A couple. Why do you ask?" "There was a pair of fiery footprints outside of Ned's house. I think the person who made them framed his sister for arson." "It sounds like the work of the devil." "The devil?" Laura questioned. "Like the actual devil?" "No, that's just the title that the major arcana goes by. He's a manipulator that buries himself within the minds of individuals, granting the powers of fire. These powers are like drugs to them. They are very dangerous people, and you must stay away from them." "Mom." "Promise me, Lauren. You have to promise you won't get involved in this business. It's too dangerous." When her mother called her by her longer name, it meant business. Fire may be dangerous, but somehow Laura doubted it would be any more or less dangerous than a vengeful poltergeist. She hated lying to her mother, but still she said, "I promise. If he's really that dangerous, though, then it's even more important Ned stay here." Laura's mother sighed, shifting slightly to gaze at the prairie dog standing awkwardly in her living room. "You're certain he has nowhere else to go? Maybe his grandparents, or a cousin, or..." The young rabbit shook her head. "He's all alone, Mom. Not to mention he's been sick for the last few days, and I want to help take care of him." Catherine gently stroked her daughter's fur with her paw. "You are so much like your father. You're always wanting to help people. I suppose Ned can stay the night. We'll make up the couch for him. Have you two eaten yet?" "Ned and Ashley were already planning on having a movie night, so we just brought the food they ordered. I may need to heat it up in the microwave first. All right. You can use the TV in the living room if you'd like. I'd be much more comfortable with that than the two of you in your room alone. Laura rolled her eyes with a huff. Ned isn't that kind of person, Mother. I told you before, he's a perfect gentleman. Besides, you know he doesn't like touching, so I doubt you'd have anything to worry about even if I wasn't well behaved. I know. It's just, you've only known each other for 2 weeks now. Don't things feel as if they're moving a little fast? The rabbit was shocked at the revelation. Had it truly only been 2 weeks since she'd met Ned? She felt as if they'd been through so much, but once she considered it, she realized that they really hadn't spent all that much time together. She didn't even know what Ned's favorite color was, so why did he feel so familiar to her? Uh-oh, I know that look. What? What look? The look of a naive young girl who's fallen hard for someone. Laura's cheeks burned scarlet beneath her fur. Mom, don't say things like that. It's embarrassing. I keep telling you, we're just friends. Of course, she said, though the smirk on her face didn't go away. Anyway, I thought you should know that your grandmother will be visiting us soon. What? Why? Well, you finally awoken to your powers, so I assume you may have some questions for her. No, I don't. It doesn't matter because I'm not going to use them ever again. She still wasn't sure how to react to the fact that her grandmother had made her father leave their family. Well, it's too late now. She's already gotten on the bus and is on the way here. Laura averted her eyes from her mother. While she wasn't thrilled about the idea, there was nothing she could do about it. Fine, she surrendered, her voice struggling to stay level. The thing that scared her most was what could happen to her friend. What if her grandmother decided to do the same thing to Ned that she'd done to her father? What if she erased Laura's memories of him too? When is she going to be here? Tomorrow. That left Laura with minimal time to come up with a plan. She wasn't sure how time passed when inside someone's mind, nor if they could be interrupted. If her grandmother decided to wipe her from Ned's mind, there may be no way to stop it from happening. Better not to chance it and just avoid her altogether by leaving early. Okay, Mom. Ned and I will be in the TV room. Thanks again for letting him stay. Just try not to go too wild, okay? Giving her mother an affirmative nod, she heated up their food and returned to find Ned on the couch, staring blankly into space. Hey, Mom says you can stay on the couch. When he didn't respond, Laura grew anxious. Panic set in. The young rabbit felt overwhelmed by the limit of knowledge she had of her powers. What sort of side effects could her memory wipe have had on him? She could nearly picture his brain crashing like a computer. Attempting to shake him out of it, she clapped her paws in front of his face, causing him to jerk back. Hey, you okay? She asked, thankful he reacted. Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking is all. I hope that Christy is okay. Why would anyone want to frame her? It just doesn't make sense. I realized that I wasn't in my Ned voice for the first half of that sentence. The young rabbit sat beside him, sliding one of the takeout boxes towards him. Eat something. You're probably starving, and your body needs nutrition to heal. He shot her a sideways glance before sticking a bite into his mouth. Once he swallowed it, he cocked his brow to ask if she was satisfied. The answer was granted to him with Laura's trademark cheerful smile before she started eating as well. Seriously, doesn't this seem odd to you? If our guy does have psychic powers, how would he even keep it a secret? I've often found that when you dwell too much on something that's right in front of you, you tend to overlook it. We should watch a movie, get our minds off of things for a bit. Oh, I'm sorry. Jeez, I got that dialogue mixed up. Uh, Seriously though, doesn't this seem odd to you? If our guy does have psychic powers, how would he even keep it a secret? I've often found that when you dwell too much on something that's right in front of you, you tend to overlook it. We should watch a movie, get our minds off of things for a bit. Hoping that would get him off the subject, Laura picked up the remote and switched the TV on. Laura, that's it. Ned jumped to his feet. What? What's it? It's right under our noses. We need to go to the restaurant. Whoever is starting these fires has to be working there. We could call Rocky, and he'll bring his lockpicks, and... Oh no, absolutely not, Ned, Laura lectured. It's one thing picking the lock on a door in this school, but you're talking about breaking into someone else's private property. If you get caught, you'll wind up right next to your sister, and I refuse to let that happen. But, he began. Something welled up at the front of Laura's mind. Sit, she stated, her voice gaining a cold energy. Immediately, Ned fell into the couch, staring up at her in shock. It was as if he'd just been forced down against his will. Laura took a sharp breath, scolding herself. Her powers seemed to be getting stronger, and that meant she had to exercise more control over them. Sorry, Ned. I didn't mean to shout. I swear, I'm doing this for your own good. Tomorrow we can visit the restaurant as customers. Then we'll investigate the workers there and see what we can dig up, okay? Right now, you need to rest, relax, and just unwind from this case. It was obvious from the look in his eyes that that was the last thing he wanted to do. Her psychic outburst seemed to bewilder him, but in the end, Laura had managed to persuade him to not go dashing for the door. Putting an old B horror movie Putting on an old B horror movie, she crossed one leg over the other, content that the subject was concluded. After a few minutes, her friend was visibly more relaxed. Ned had become engrossed in the movie, every now and then taking a silent bite of his food as he watched the cheesy effects with intense interest. Laura, on the other hand, found her focus less on the movie and more on her friend. He was such an oddball, and yet that's why she liked him so much. While other students only saw him as a grumpy, antisocialite, she was able to see further into his life than others could. There was much more to him than what was on the surface. Kind of like me, she thought bitterly. The peace and quiet wouldn't last long, however, as their movie was interrupted by the sound of Laura's cell phone ringing. Glancing at the number, then looking back, she found Ned glaring at her. Sorry, she squeaked, excusing herself from the couch before answering the phone. Hello? Laura, it's Rocky. Sorry it's late, but you told me to keep you updated on the case. I found something that may be of interest. Really? That's wonderful. Don't be so certain. Have you learned anything? The rabbit thought about it. We think whoever did it was outside of Ned's house. Be careful, Rocky. We may be dealing with a pyrokinetic, someone who can light fires with their minds. If that's the case, then you could be in danger. To maintain safety, don't do any more investigating without the club, okay? Ned's house? Why would she be outside of Ned's house? Laura hesitated. She wasn't sure whether it was a good idea to tell Rocky the reason for the club's initial interest. That's what we aim to find out, she explained vaguely. Now, what's this information you found? And how do you know it's a she? Do you have a new suspect? Yes, but maybe it'd be better to compare notes. I'll call Ned and Ashley so we can set up a meeting at the diner tomorrow. No, don't worry about calling Ned. He's staying at my house for the night, just for safety's sake. Your house? Ooh la la, do I smell a romance blooming? Laura hung up the phone with a sigh, not even bothering to answer his question. Even still, everyone's assertions made her curious. Could something happen between her and Ned? Turning to look back at him, a smile quivered on her lips. Picturing Ned dressed up nice with flowers and chocolate on her doorstep tickled her. Like that, the thought vanished from her mind. Ned was not the sort for romance, she decided. When she returned to the living room, she sat beside him to continue watching the movie. Any news? He asked, not looking away from the screen. Possibly. Rocky says he has information, but he wants to meet to talk about it. No word from Ashley. I can only assume that means whoever I saw in the window hasn't come back. Looking at her, he gave a half-hearted smile. I never asked you, Laura. Why are you always so worried about me? I mean, I know you take care of everyone, but I don't really get it. Just because we're all friends doesn't mean you have to go so far just for us. Well, wouldn't you do the same thing for me? Honestly, I don't think anyone could do the things you do, Laura. The thought saddened the young rabbit. Still, she allowed herself to believe that her friends would sacrifice just as much for her if it came down to it. In a way, Ned already had by giving up his memories. Just because he didn't remember sacrificing them didn't make it any less selfless. As the movie drew to a close, she looked over to find that Ned was already asleep, his head propped up on the arm of the sofa and legs curled up behind him. She placed her paw on his forehead to check to see if he had a fever and found him reasonably tepid. Relieved, she draped a blanket over him and retired to her room. Sitting on the floor, she laid out the cards her mother had given her and moved them into the pattern she'd been shown. There they were, all 22 of them. She couldn't figure out what they meant or where they came from, and part of her wondered if she ever would. Reaching to the frog, Judgment, she lifted the card and examined it with a determined gaze. This was the one that represented Ned, and the one that represents me is... Reaching down, she picked up the card with the doe on it, the High Priestess. Placing the two beside one another, she closed her eyes and tried to picture them in her mind. Soon, she could feel herself drifting from her body. When her eyes opened, she was staring down at herself, now asleep on the ground. This was astral projection. For a moment, fear gripped her. Desperately, she tried to return to her own body with no avail. After focusing so hard that it gave her a headache, she surrendered to her ethereal state. Whenever this had happened in the past, it had always been to show her something important. So, maybe to return, she needed to find out what it was she was supposed to see. First, she decided to check on Ned. Phasing through the door, she floated down the stairs to find him still curled up on the couch where she'd left him. To her shock, the frog was sitting nonchalantly on the back of the couch, staring over him as if she were a loving mother. Noticing Laura, she gave her a harsh glare that chilled the young rabbit to her core. The amount of raw power contained within the spirit was frightening to behold, and worse, she looked angry with Laura. Had tampering with Ned's memories upset judgment? I'm sorry, Laura offered, unsure of what else to say to her. The frog's expression changed from anger to confusion, and lastly transitioned to amusement. Giving Laura a smirk, she pointed one long finger up towards the ceiling. Following the gesture with her eyes, Laura stared upward before floating higher. She escaped through her attic, passing through the roof, and soon she hovered up above all of Warren. For a moment, she was lost in the city's nighttime beauty. However, something was off about the city's lights. Randomly, small bursts of color lit up like beacons, shining a beam straight into the sky. Something inside of her told her that these beacons weren't like the other lights. Looking down, she realized that a pair of these beams were coming from her own house as well. One from her room, and one from the living room. Were these the major arcana? If so, then that meant one had to be the arsonist. Peering towards Ned's house, she saw a beam nearby, but her phone hadn't rung. That meant it probably wasn't the intruder, so who else could it be? The answer dawned on her as she realized that perhaps the beam was from Ashley. Maybe Rocky had one too. Laura couldn't tell because she didn't know where he lived, but somehow it seemed like if three of them had one, it would make sense that he did too. Looking towards the jailhouse, she could see that there was a beam coming from there as well. Laura was willing to bet that meant Ned's sister also possessed a major arcana. Was it the devil? Assuming she hadn't been able to leave her cell, it would clear her of being the intruder. But then again, Laura wasn't exactly confined to her room when projecting. She stayed there, staring at the lights and trying to put the pieces together. Soon the sun started to peer over the horizon, and in an instant she woke back in her body with more questions than she'd started with. Chapter 8. Amidst the questions, one thought rang out in Laura's mind. Her grandmother was still on her way. She had to get Ned out of the house. Tearing down the stairs, she moved to his side and shook him awake. Laura, Ned groaned. What time is it? It's 6:30, she answered. Come on, we have to meet Rocky. The prairie dog let out a tired whine, rolling away from her. It's Saturday. We don't even have to get up this early for school. While she knew he had a point, Laura refused to give up. Grabbing the blanket he tangled himself in, she gave a fierce tug that pulled him from the couch. The thud he made when he hit the ground sounded like it hurt, but that concern was flooded away by the fear of what would happen if her grandmother found him. Ned, we have to go, she repeated sternly. Maybe I could use the voice like yesterday, she thought before instantly banishing the idea. Fine, fine, he growled, sending an irritable look towards her. Though his mouth didn't move, she knew that look was his way of saying, that doesn't mean I won't complain about this later. Following her towards the door, just as her paw reached for the knob, the door swung in to reveal a thin, wrinkled old woman. Laura's heart raced as she stood protectively between her grandmother and Ned. Oh, good morning, sweetheart, the older woman greeted with a cheerful smile. I didn't expect you to be up at this time. Yeah, Ned and I have some schoolwork we have to get caught up on, the young rabbit lied, trying to pull him past her. Ah, so this is the Ned I've heard so much about, she beamed, pulling his paw out of Laura's and shaking it. It is a pleasure to meet you, Ned. I'm Lenora, Laura's grandmother. Her mother has told me so much about you. After a few more shakes, something seemed to dawn on her. Oh, sorry, I forgot. You're not one for touching. It's okay, Ned assured her with a sheepish smile. I'm just embarrassed. I'm sure I left a poor impression. On the contrary, she informed me you were a very brave and bright young man. She did. All right, Nana. Ned and I really have to get going, so Laura began. You're not even going to give your Nana a hug, she interrupted, opening her arms wide. Obediently, Laura embraced her grandmother before giving Ned a subtle wave to leave. Her signal went over his head as he simply stood there. Relax, her grandmother whispered in her ear. I already know. You did good, Laura. You've no need for concern. As they separated, she looked at her grandmother, trying to figure out how she knew she'd taken Ned's memories. That was when she realized. At the tips of the older rabbit's ears, two glimmering pearls were nestled in them. Her grandmother had been the other Laura from Ned's memories. All right, Laura murmured, making her way past her. I'll talk to you later tonight, okay? I look forward to it, she replied cheerfully. With that, she was out, Ned on her heels. He paused for a moment to give the older rabbit his farewells, but Laura pulled him after her. Once they'd walked about a block, Ned tore his paw from Laura's. Laura, what's going on? He demanded. You're acting crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, gee, I don't know. Maybe the way you practically launched us out of your house. Why don't you want me to meet your grandmother? It's not like that. I just really want to get started on the case, she lied. Neb tapped his foot and gave her an accusatory stare. What? It's true. I don't believe you. Well, it's the truth. Fine then. If you're so excited to do the case, you take the lead. Laura froze. That was not what she was hoping for. But you're the president. You know much more than I do about this sort of thing. It was evident by his smirk that he knew he had her cornered. I'm just saying you seem so eager. Besides, I'm still sick. You wouldn't want me to stress myself, right? Fine, she grumbled, pulling out her cell phone. Punching in the number for their mutual feline friend, she held the phone to her ear. One rang, then another, before a tired voice picked up on the other end of the line. Hello? Ashley yawned. Ashley, it's Laura. Why are you calling so early? She complained before her voice became more excited. Did you see the guy by your house? Is there about to be a fight? I'll be right over. No, Ashley, wait. But it was too late. The cat had already hung up the phone and most likely was tearing her way towards Laura's house. Well, Ned asked. She's on her way, Laura commented, not willing to show her frustration to her friend. Calling Rocky next, she was grateful to hear that he, at least, was awake. Good morning, Laura, he greeted cheerfully. You're up early. Yeah, well, I wanted to get an early start on the case. Can you meet us at the restaurant in about 20 minutes? Sure, he agreed. I'll bring some stuff I found out. I figured I'd do some digging to see if there were any cases like this before, and I think I found the jackpot. Wonderful, the rabbit cheered. At least there was some good news. See you there. See ya. As she hung up, she could hear the loud, rhythmic pounding of Ashley's sneakers on the pavement. I'm here. I'm here. Where is he? Did I miss the fight? She asked, slightly out of breath. Ashley, how did you make it here so fast? It's like a 5-minute walk from our house. Laura called you less than a minute ago. The cat gave him a sly grin as she placed the metal rebar she'd brought over her shoulder. Did you forget that I'm an athlete, Ned? You've got to be fast to be on the track team. Ashley, why did you bring that? Laura questioned, pointing to her makeshift weapon. What? You didn't expect me to come to a fight without my whooping stick, did you? Somehow, I bet this baby will work better on a fire guy than on a ghost. We're not fighting anyone, the rabbit retorted sternly. We're not? Then why the heck did you call me at 6:30 in the morning? To ask you to meet us at the restaurant. Man, I brought my whooping stick for nothing, she grumbled, hiding it under Laura's porch before coming back. Well, I'm here now. Might as well go. I'm shocked that Ned managed to wake up early enough for this. I didn't, he griped. Laura was eager to start on the case. He accented his words by making quotation marks in the air to show his skepticism. She woke me up, so I'm letting her take the lead on this case. Ooh, good idea. I'm sure her magic powers will be very helpful in finding our killer. Arsonist, he corrected. And what are you talking about with magic powers? Ashley, please take this seriously, Laura interjected before the conversation could go anywhere bad. I'm sure Ned doesn't appreciate you making jokes while his sister's freedom is on the line. Ashley's ears flattened guiltily as she looked down at her shoes. You're right. Sorry, Ned. It's fine. Let's just get going. Laura's got me curious as to how this pans out as well. As the group entered the newly repaired restaurant, a bell rang overhead before blending in with the rest of the customer chatter. They found Rocky at a booth, dressed in a brown trench coat with a fedora propped on his head. A pair of sunglasses were perched on his nose as he scanned the other tables. What are you wearing? Ashley laughed, sliding into the bench beside him. Shh! Are you insane? Keep your voice down. What if the arsonist knows we're here? Then I'd say you tipped him off with that ridiculous get-up, she teased. Ned and Laura slid into place across from them. What do you have for us, Rocky? You said you found something earlier. Right. Reaching into his messenger bag, he pulled out a piece of paper and passed it around. Look at this. A string of arsons, all restaurants. No fuel source, no sign of how it started. This has happened before, Ned questioned. Over half a dozen times. What's more, we have a second suspect. Only a month after the fires, an employee would leave the job and move on to another restaurant. A few months later, surprise, new one burns down. Who is it? The rabbit asked, just as Rocky swiped up the paper when a waitress came by. Good morning, she greeted in a deep southern drawl. What can I get y'all to drink, Laura's eyes flowed from Rocky, who was nervously waiting for someone else to speak, back to the woman. She was a young adult, about Christie's age, with swirling horns coming out of her head. Water for me, please, the rabbit said. The sheep girl, whose name tag read Lucy, scribbled down the order, then looked to the rest of the club. Duplicate orders came from each member. 4 waters, got it, she said with a wink. I'll be right back. As she left, Laura leaned closer. That's her, isn't it? Was I that obvious? Rocky murmured. Maybe Laura had another one of her famous hunches, Ashley taunted before Laura kicked her shin to shut her up. Well, I saw what looked like horns when we were at Ned's house. Look around. Do you see anyone else with horns here? Scanning around the diner, all 4 confirmed that their waitress was, in fact, the only person with horns. So, what do we do? Rocky asked, reporter to the police. Ned shook his head. We don't have enough proof. Ours is circumstantial at best. I vote we tail her when she gets off her shift to see if we can find out anything else. How will we know when she gets off, though? If we stay here all day, it'll definitely stand out. Oh, that's Ashley. How will we know when she gets off, though? If we stay here all day, it'll definitely stand out. Even more than Rocky's bad fashion sense, Ashley commented. I can talk to Christie's sous chef. They were pretty good friends. I'm sure he won't mind telling me her schedule. Christie, you know the other suspect? Rocky asked. The whole table fell silent. Ned looked to Laura with a stern expression. You didn't tell him? I thought it would be best if it came from you. I didn't want to seem like a gossip. Tell me what? The prairie dog sighed. Christie is my older sister. They locked her up because she got fired just before the diner caught fire. That makes sense as to why they'd assume it was her, but even still, we may be able to get some wiggle room in the case by putting out some evidence to gum up her extradition. Again, everyone was quiet as they all gave him questioning glances. Come on, guys, it's basic law speak. We show them reasonable doubt, they hold off on her trial to investigate more. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card, but so long as she doesn't plead guilty, it'll give us plenty of time to find our real arsonist. Murmurs of agreement circled the club, then Laura cleared her throat, taking the floor. Her biggest concern was that Ned's questions might attract too much unwanted attention if he were asking alone. Maybe I should come with you when you ask those questions, just in case, she suggested. Good idea. From now on, we should stay in groups. If we end up alone, it'll be easier to pick us off. Pick us off? Rocky wheezed. Like Ted? What did you think would happen if you were set on fire, Rocky? Ashley questioned, nudging him playfully with her elbow. I did not sign up for being set on fire. He shut back the gritted teeth. Forget this. I'm out. He went to stand, but Ashley grabbed him by the coattails and pulled him back down. You leave, and I'll tell the entire school how you cried like a baby and wet yourself during our last case, she threatened with a disarming grin. What? I didn't. Who will they believe, Rocky? Some dweeb from the newspaper or the most popular girl in the school? The raccoon grimaced at the realization. It was true, she'd caught him by the tail, and worse, she knew it. Fine, we'll keep watch while you two get the schedule. With that, Laura and Ned made their way towards the bar, where the sous chef was preparing omelets for the breakfast rush. Hey, Copernicus, the prairie dog greeted the reptilian man. Looking up, the lizard waved to him cheerfully. Hey, little man, how's it going? His smile faded as he realized who he was talking to. Oh, sorry, Ned. I heard about Christie. That's a shame. Thanks, I really appreciate that, Ned replied. I was going to actually ask if you knew when Lucy was getting off work today. Why, going to ask her on a date? I think she may be a bit old for you, buddy. Ned blushed and shook his head. No, nothing like that. I was just curious. I need to talk to her about my sister, but I wanted to wait until she wasn't working. Ah, okay. I think she's working a 14-hour today. I don't know how that girl does it. She's got more energy than anyone I've ever seen. She should get off at 8 p.m. Ned scribbled it down as Laura's eyes followed the sheep, who was now setting glasses down at their table. While Ashley looked completely calm, Rocky was sweating bullets. If not for that being typical when he was nervous, she'd worry that Lucy was using her powers on him right that instant. All right, thanks, Copernicus. Don't mention it, Ned. Be sure to tell your sister I said hi. No one else may believe her, but I know she didn't do it. I'll pass it on. I'm sure she appreciates it. With that, they rejoined their friends before leaving the restaurant and their waters not a moment later. Chapter 9. Upon leaving the diner, the 4 decided to part ways and rendezvous back at the restaurant around 7:30 p.m. That way, they could follow Lucy closely enough without having to worry about her spotting them in the dark. Laura suggested that Ned pay a visit to Christie, partially because she knew that his sister was probably scared and could use the company, but it also gave her the benefit of not having him around when she spoke with her grandmother. As she skipped up the steps, she entered her home and removed her scarf. "Hello," she called out. "In here, my child." Her grandmother's calm voice was like a friendly beacon, offering her comfort and warmth from the problems that seemed to surround her. As Laura made her way inside, she steeled herself against the sensation. Comfort and warmth wasn't what she needed. Right now, she needed to help Ned and Christy, and if that meant giving up a bit of comfort, she'd gladly make the sacrifice. In the living room, her grandmother sat cross-legged on the floor, with the lights off and candles that filled the room with the scent of lavender stationed around her, flickering. "Nana?" "Just a moment, Laura. I am communing now with the High Priestess." "You can talk to her?" A wrinkled smile formed on the older rabbit's lips as her eyes opened. "Indeed. I will teach you how to do so, as well. In time. I suppose we should start at the beginning." With a flick of her wrist, the candles went out and the lights flicked on. "Can you give your Nana a hand? I fear it's not as easy for me to stand up as it once was." Taking her grandmother's paws in her own, Laura pulled her to her feet and offered her her cane. With that, her grandmother gave her an appreciative nod before turning to scoop up the candles. "How did you do that?" the younger one asked. "Flipping on the lights and blowing out the candles, I mean." Lenora gave a chuckle. "Like that, did you? It's just a simple parlor trick. That will come to you in time. You may be surprised by what sort of power you can tap into with a bit of practice." "I don't want to practice," Laura huffed. "It was bad enough taking Ned's memories. I don't ever want to do anything like that again. And for the record, the reason he found out about my powers in the first place is because you went into his dreams." My, I must admit, dear, I wasn't certain you had the fire in your belly. After what happened with your father, I assumed that perhaps his genes were watering down our lineage." "Don't talk about him like that!" The way she'd raised her voice caused the kindness to fade from her grandmother's face. Wheeling on her, Lenora pointed to the couch, and in the same way Laura had done to Ned, said, "Sit!" Her legs buckled with the command, causing the young rabbit to fall back onto the couch with a plop. A shiver ran up her spine as she realized just how terrified Ned must have been when she'd used the voice on him. "I will not tolerate rudeness, Laura. I am the matriarch of this family, and you will show respect. For now, you can demonstrate that by holding your tongue and listening. As I said, we should start at the beginning." Adjusting her weight on her cane, she spoke. "Long, long ago, our ancestors were once the servants to a royal family in the Far East. The Empress, another of the major arcana, was the matriarch of that family, with her husband, the Emperor, being the patriarch. Understand thus far?" When her granddaughter nodded, she continued. "Our service to them was one of providing wisdom. Our men served as brilliant strategists, able to predict an opponent's plans far in advance. But our women were the handmaidens to the Empress herself. One in particular was her absolute favorite. This rabbit's name was Bai-Tu. She would listen to her mistress' problems and keep her secrets in the way a mother would for her daughter." Taking off her glasses, Lenora took a moment to clean them before placing them back on the bridge of her nose. When she sat down beside her granddaughter, Laura meekly spoke up. "The major arcana were around way back when?" "Oh, yes, dear. They've been around for as long as anyone can remember. Anyway, Bai-Tu had a wish. She was barren and wanted a child so very badly. In recognition of her services, the Empress gave her a gift. See, the Empress is the major arcana of creation and motherhood, so with her power she gave birth to a new major arcana." "The High Priestess." "Very good," she beamed, "though she didn't give birth to her in the traditional sense. She created her from the essence of the universe, which has many names. Mana, Aether, Zen, just to list a few. In doing so, she planted her in Tu's womb like a seed. Her servant couldn't be happier. When her daughter was born, she had the spirit of the High Priestess inside of her, but unfortunately, Tu did not survive through the process. She died with her baby in her arms. The Empress raised the child as if she were her own. When she grew older, it was said that she was the wisest and most beautiful woman in the world. People traveled from all over just to catch a glimpse of her beauty and seek her wisdom. Then one day, she left." Laura frowned. "She left? Why would she leave?" "Why does anyone ever leave their life behind? For love, of course. One day a handsome young rabbit caught the eye of Tu's daughter, Xiao Mei. This rabbit was a great warrior named Sun Tusi. As if in a fairy tale, the two began to fall for one another at first sight. However, there were strict rules back then about what was appropriate for a man and a woman. The Empress's handmaidens were often seen as chaste and pure. To involve themselves with any man was taboo. Still, May could not help herself, so one day decided to sneak away from the palace and elope with Tuzi. The younger rabbit's heart sank. She had a feeling that she knew where this story was going. But the Empress was mad, right? She tried to stop them. Her grandmother shook her head. No, the Empress loved May very much. As such, before she could leave, she gave her a gift. Every first child for her descendants would be a daughter. One would serve as Xiao Tu served to the Empress. The next would serve as Xiao Mei had. That is why our powers skip a generation. Your mother is like Xiao Tu. You are like Xiao Mei. Staring at her shoes, Laura wasn't sure what to say. It was a beautiful story that made her heart race in its romanticism, but at the same time, I still don't want to learn to use my powers, she murmured. I'm afraid you do not have much of a choice, Lenore told her. The High Priestess will manifest, Laura, whether you like her to or not. You should embrace your gift, not reject it. That is why I will be living with you for some time, until your tutelage is complete and you've fully mastered your abilities. You can't force me to use them. I won't do what I did to Ned to anyone else. Never again. He is my best friend, and I betrayed him because that's what you and Mom wanted me to do. I won't let you push him away the same way you did to my father. The younger rabbit felt as if she would break into tears at any moment. Your father was a foolish man, her grandmother chastised. When he found out about our gift, he wanted us to parade it around as if we were some sort of superheroes. That is not what our powers are for. He wanted you to help people. We do help people, but we must do so in secret. Don't you understand, child? I am telling you this to protect you. I'm sick of everyone treating me like some fragile flower. I don't need protecting. I am more than capable of taking care of myself. My friends care about me, and I care about them. Something was welling up inside of Laura's chest. She felt as though she were brimming with courage. Standing up, she grabbed her things and went for the door. I need to go meet with Ned. When I do, I plan on returning all of his memories. Because unlike you and my mother, I refuse to be afraid. I used to not let people in, but when I needed help, he was there for me. And I... She paused for a moment, her cheeks burning red under her fur as she tried to come up with the next words. I want to be there for him, too. And I'll do it without my powers. So thank you, Nana, but I have no interest in learning what you have to teach me. With that, she slammed the door shut behind her and headed to her friend's home, hoping that he was back from visiting his sister. Laura knocked on Ned's door. There was no response, yet she could have sworn she heard someone moving around inside. Ned? She called softly. It's me, Laura. I know I'm early, but I need to talk to you. It's really important. Come in, he sniffed. The door's unlocked. A pit formed in the rabbit's stomach as she opened the door and glanced inside. Ned was sitting on the couch, head buried in his paws. It was clear from the way he was heaving that he was in tears. That bad? She asked softly, sitting beside him. Yeah. What happened? We got into an argument. About what? Ned bit his lip before looking up at his friend. My sister. She doesn't believe in all this stuff. Ghosts, psychics, monsters. She thinks they're all just me pretending. When I told her that I thought a pyrokinetic was responsible for this, she shouted at me. She told me to go home and to take this seriously. He swallowed a sob. You should have seen her, Laura. She's just given up completely. It's like she doesn't even want to try to fight it. Laura wrapped her arms around him for a hug. She knew it probably made him uncomfortable, but she wasn't entirely sure what else to do to help. I'm so sorry, Ned. I know when you first told me about psychic powers, I didn't believe you either. I know better now. No, you don't. I know you're actually a skeptic. I get it. It's hard to believe what you can't see. No, I mean, I really do know, she emphasized. When he looked at her in confusion, she sighed. I'll show you. Close your eyes. When he did, she placed her hands on his temples, then gently rested her head on his like she'd done before. She found herself back in the library. Now, though, it was completely empty. No books, no Ned, nothing. What's going on? She murmured. That's when she saw it. Her grandmother, now in a younger shape, stood before her. Nana, what are you doing here? What did you do to Ned's memories? I had to make you listen somehow, Laura. Your powers are growing. If you refuse to use them, they will burst out of you in ways you can't control. When that happens, things will be very bad. Things like what you see around you right now. If I were to burn all of his memories, you'd be powerless to stop me. Your friend would wake up as a comatose vegetable and eventually would die because he'd forget how to breathe. No, Nana, please, I'm begging you, don't hurt him. Are you willing to listen then, child? Enough. The new voice came stern and flat, shocking both Laura and her grandmother. Turning to regard the voice, they found Judgment standing beside Ned's manifestation, her webbed digits on his shoulder. When Ned's lips moved, the voice that emerged was not his own. I do not know what you two think you are doing, but the boy is under my protection. You will return his memories now, both of you. Laura didn't hesitate or argue. Grabbing the books she'd kept, she offered them to Judgment. Reaching out, the frog grasped them in her free arm and drew them close to her chest. Now you, Ned echoed for the major arcana, shifting to look at Laura's grandmother. As much respect as I have for you, Judgment, this is a lesson to be taught between my granddaughter and me. It does not concern you. You have threatened the boy's life. That is cause enough for me to be concerned. You know, priestess, there are many of the major arcana who hold contempt for you. Unlike some of my kin, I stand on neutral ground. Should you force my hand, you can rest assured you will spend the rest of your days hunted by every major arcana you've ever sealed. I will not ask again. Give me his memories. Do not threaten me, Judgment. My granddaughter is the most precious thing to me. I will not allow her to be engulfed in the High Priestess power. As he is to you, so she is to me, and I will not back down. Send whoever you like at me. I will seal them again, and so help me, I'll start with you. The same amused grin that Laura had seen during her astral projections crossed Judgment's face. You foolish old woman. You think you know so much of our kind, but it is obvious now that you know nothing. I know enough to defeat you. Perhaps, but there is something that you cannot see. The girl does not possess the power of the High Priestess. Chapter 10. That is not possible, Lenore cried. Laura felt her mouth go dry. I don't? How am I here, then? I mean, how do I have powers? In time you will learn, Judgment said. For now, simply know that it is not the High Priestess who fuels you. You should know that an individual cannot inherit the power of the High Priestess until the previous has passed. Nora was silent. Laura looked back at her grandmother with a frown. Nana, I know you want to teach me how to use these powers. I appreciate that, really I do. But please, don't involve Ned in this. When I went to remove his memories, he willingly gave them to me. He told me that I was more important to him than my powers could ever be. So please, you have to give his memories back to him. I care about him deeply. If not for his sake, do it for me. Please? After a few moments, Lenora vanished in a blink. She appeared an instant later, and the thousands of books began arranging themselves back onto Ned's shelves. Laura felt as if she could breathe again. Ned was safe for the time being. High Priestess or not, you need to learn to tame your powers. The major arcana are powerful beings. If you're not careful, you could be swept up in trouble you're not prepared for. Having uttered her ominous warning, Lenore faded from Ned's consciousness, leaving her granddaughter alone with his psyche and Judgment. Facing the frog, Laura frowned. I am really sorry. Please know that I would never hurt Ned. I truly do care about him. I know. As the young rabbit went to sever the connection, she paused. Out of curiosity, you know everything there is to know about Ned, don't you? I know much, but not even he can know everything. Why? Does Ned like me? Laura asked, her cheeks turning red beneath her fur. I mean, not that I like him, but just everyone keeps talking about it, and I was curious if they knew something I didn't. You know what? It's stupid. Just forget I asked. The slightest wink of a smile appeared at the corner of the frog's mouth. Goodbye, Laura. I will be watching you. And do not worry, Ned will not remember that you took his memories. Laura wasn't sure how she felt about that, but she nodded and broke the connection. As her hands fell from Ned, they opened their eyes simultaneously. Immediately the pair broke apart, blushing profusely and making apologies. Suddenly the prairie dog winced, putting his paw to his forehead. Ow, why does my head hurt so bad? Yeah, about that. She badly wanted to confess to Ned what had happened, how she'd taken his memories because she worried she'd lose him forever, but then couldn't bear the thought of such a fate. Instead, she said, I'm sorry if this makes you uncomfortable, Ned. I'm just really glad that you're my friend. I know you know that, but still I feel like I have to tell you. His cheeks burned under his fur as he tried to formulate his own response to her. Where's all of this coming from? You recently helped me with something I was trying to work through. You probably don't even know you did it, but you helped me. Thank you, Ned. Hey, you've helped me a lot, too. You don't have to keep thanking me. We're friends, Laura. Friends do things for each other, right? What happened to friend is just another word for someone who hasn't stabbed you in the back yet, she teased. The prairie dog shrugged his shoulders, flashing her a grin. Maybe you're rubbing off on me. Glancing at her phone, Laura sighed. We're late, she stated. If we want to make it to the restaurant on time, we'll have to run there. Relax, he yawned. We can be a few minutes late. Rocky is such a stickler about punctuality, he's probably there already. If so, then he'll keep tabs on Lucy until we can meet up with him. Besides, I'm more interested in hearing what it is you have to say that was super important. What? Oh, right. Laura had nearly forgotten how their meeting had started. The shock of discovering that she could potentially be under the influence of a different major arcana frightened her. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for the way I acted with my grandmother. She, um, I was scared. Scared? It's hard to imagine what would scare you, Laura. The irony of his statement tickled her. Ned, she felt, was braver than anyone she'd ever met before. If anything, their first case was testament to that. I'm scared of losing people. You already know that my father isn't around anymore. I recently found out he didn't really leave so much as we left him. I hate I was too young to keep from losing him. I don't want to lose anyone else. And you were worried you'd lose me because of your grandmother's powers, he noted. Laura was completely shocked. She'd never told him about her Nana's powers. As far as she knew, the only major arcana Ned was familiar with was judgment. Seeing her expression, he chuckled. Don't seem so surprised. During our first case, you loaned me her necklace, remember? When I held it, I could see the remnants of the ghost, even though Ashley couldn't. I figured the best explanation was simply that your grandmother had clairvoyance as well. Some of the residual energy managed to somehow become trapped in the necklace. Soon, the rabbit started giggling, which then evolved into laughter. She couldn't stop. All that strain and effort to hide her powers from Ned, and he'd managed to figure out her grandmother had them as well, all because he held onto her necklace for less than an hour. What? What's so funny? Wiping the tears from her eyes, Laura caught her breath. Sorry, it's just that the family is supposed to keep it a secret, but you managed to figure it out even before I did. As amusing as it was to her, Ned did not share her feelings on the subject. Your dad. Did your family leaving him have to do with your powers? Again, he'd got it in one guess. Becoming serious once more, Laura nodded. Sort of. Not mine. My grandmother's. He wanted her to use them to help solve crimes. Since he was a threat of exposure, she wiped his memories of my mother and me, and we haven't seen him since. Laura, I'm so sorry, Ned murmured. Have you ever tried to find him? I don't even know where I'd start, she admitted sadly. All I have is his name, and somehow I suspect the name Alex Peters is pretty common. Well, maybe Rocky could. No, Laura interrupted. He would ask too many questions. I'm sure he'd want to know the entire situation, and I don't think I'm ready to tell him about my powers yet. Ned must have noticed that she wanted to drop the subject because he let it go. Let's get going, he suggested. Don't want the others to get the wrong impression of us. What did you mean by that? Laura asked as they reached the door. Well, we're the leaders of the club, right? This is a club investigation. Don't you think we should be there? Oh, right, yeah. Sorry, I'm such a space cadet lately. Why couldn't Laura get the idea of romance with Ned out of her mind? A worried thought formed. Did she have feelings for him? As they approached the diner, Ashley and Rocky were already waiting behind the dumpster. True to her nature, the cat was mid-complaint. Why do we have to hide out here, Rocky? We can just get a table like last time. Are you nuts? She'd see us follow her home. Funny, you don't look like garbage, Ned mocked, joining them. Laura was happy to see him interacting with the club more. While his illness hadn't provided him much in the way of social opportunity, Ned was opening up to the members he'd been most reluctant to let join. There you are. Where have you been? Rocky hissed. She's going to get off of work any minute now. Back off, Rocky. We're here, aren't we? Just then a bell tinkled over the door of the restaurant, and sure enough, the white, woolly woman stepped out into the light of one of the street lamps. As she strutted down the street, the club followed after her, sticking to the shadows so she wouldn't see them. At one point, she heard their footsteps and wheeled around to see if someone was following her. Luckily, all four managed to duck out of her line of sight before she spotted them. With a nervous laugh, the sheep continued on her way home. Soon she climbed up a set of concrete steps to enter a duplex squeezed in among the crowded city's buildings. Something's wrong, Laura whispered as the door shut behind the waitress. Yeah, we're knowingly following someone who can light things on fire with her mind, Rocky grumbled. Not that. Did you notice that she seemed a little jumpy? On a dark night like this, I think anyone would be a bit spooked, Ashley pointed out. Wait, Laura has a point, Ned chimed in. That doesn't make any sense. How so? The young rabbit whispered. Well, if she's our arsonist, why would she be nervous? Anyone who could set people on fire with their minds wouldn't need to worry about being attacked in the street. So she's not our arsonist? Ashley asked. Only one way to find out. Ned and I will knock on her front door and talk to her about what happened. Maybe she knows something we don't. While we're distracting her, you two should see if you can find another way in. Maybe there will be some more information hidden somewhere. Are you suggesting we should break into her apartment? Ashley's tail twitched with excitement. I like this new bad girl, Laura. It's like the end of Grease. Rolling her eyes, the rabbit moved towards the duplex's stoop. As Ashley and Rocky disappeared around the corner, Ned came to her side. Exchanging glances to confirm the other was ready, the pair walked up the steps to the door. Ned pressed his paw against the buzzer. A haunting tone rang out from inside of the house. The door opened partially, revealing one nervous eye peering between the crack. A chain ran across the door to prevent anyone from forcing it open. Hello? Lucy's voice sounded as nervous as she'd looked when she was walking down the street. Do I know you? Sort of, Laura answered. We sat at your booth early this morning. We're really sorry to disturb you, Lucy. We wanted to ask you a few questions about something personal, so we thought it would be best to wait until you were off the clock. Oh, I guess that's okay. Come on in. Is it just you two? Yes, they both lied at once. Better to let Rocky and Ashley do their work. Right now, Laura's job was to keep Lucy focused on her instead of setting them on fire. Chapter 11. As it turned out, Lucy was a much more polite host than one would expect from a serial arsonist. Without even asking, she went to her kitchen and poured both teenagers a cool glass of lemonade before pouring herself one as well. Setting the glasses down in front of them, she tried to force a cheerful demeanor, but the tension she'd worn all night remained just under the surface. So what was it you wanted to ask me about? The waitress quizzed, sipping from her drink. It's about my sister. She was recently arrested for arson. Oh, the poor dear, she gasped. Sure enough, Laura's ears began to twitch. Something was definitely off about the situation. The rabbit was certain she'd seen horns outside of the window, but this young woman seemed genuinely sympathetic. Where were you the day the restaurant's kitchen caught fire? The first time or second time? Both, Ned replied. Well, on the first day, I was working at my second job, so I wasn't even there. They told me later that it was a strange fire because there wasn't any gas or anything used. They still fired that nice chef anyway. That was when the woolly woman suddenly straightened with the realization. Wait, that chef, what was her name? Christine? Christy, the prairie dog corrected. Yeah, that's it. I saw her the second time when she came back. I remember because she seemed really upset when she left. I tried to make her feel better, but she seemed annoyed by something. Annoyed? Not angry? Laura questioned. No, just irritated. The manager told her that the company policy states that she couldn't be rehired until the end of the quarter, and she seemed to accept that. Then I went to the bathroom. There was a pause between the three of them as Ned looked at her incredulously. And? The girl turned a bright red under her fur. I'm not going to go into details. You're sitting right next to your girlfriend. Don't you have any shame at all? She accused. We're not a couple, the rabbit corrected, scratching her own head. I think what Ned was trying to say was that the last bit doesn't seem to really relate to the rest of your story. Oh, right. So when I came back from the bathroom, that's when I saw her storm out in a huff. She had seemed fine before then, so something must have happened between when she left the restaurant and the end of her meeting with Mr. Manager. Somehow, Laura doubted that the man's real name was Mr. Manager, only adding to the conclusion that she was certain Ned had reached. Lucy was far too much of a ditz to be their criminal. Or she just doesn't know she's our criminal, something whispered in the back of Laura's mind. The realization startled her. Looking to her friend, she hadn't even considered the possibility that the criminal was like him. It was entirely possible that the Major Arcana was working in the background with this girl. Ned, Laura whispered to him, what if she doesn't know she's setting the fires? What do you mean? He whispered back. It's rude to whisper, you know. Sorry, Laura apologized. We're just going over some information about the case. We thought you may know more details about it, but it seems we may have been mistaken. Wait, Lucy, if you don't mind me asking, have you been having any strange dreams lately? Strange dreams? I don't think so. Why? You seem anxious. I thought perhaps you've been having trouble sleeping. The ram was surprised by his declaration. How did you know? You keep fidgeting in your seat and looking behind us towards the door. I also noticed that your hands were shaking when you refilled our glasses at the diner. Oh dear, I'd hoped no one had noticed. Yes, I'm afraid I've been struggling to get some shut-eye lately. May I ask why? Laura couldn't help but wonder where Ned was going with these questions. If Lucy hadn't dreamed of the Major Arcana, had she instead seen it physically manifest? The possibility frightened the young rabbit almost as much as the thought of a serial arsonist. The waitress nervously bit her lip, trying to come up with a response. Well, it all started with the phone calls, she began. Taking out a notepad from her bag, Laura leaned forward to take notes. Go ahead, she encouraged her. This happened shortly after I began working at the diner. When the phone would ring there, I'd pick it up, only to hear heavy breathing, followed by a gritty voice asking if Christy was working that day. I'd tell them that I couldn't discuss other employee schedules, and then they'd hang up. Frowning, Laura looked at the words she'd written. Did the voice ever say anything else? Well, that's where it gets scary. The day after the restaurant caught fire the second time, I came home to a message on my answer machine. The voice had called my house and told me to say I was the one who burned the kitchen down. Did they threaten you at all? Ned asked. No, I mean, not at first. I tried to ignore it, but the voice called again and said if I didn't tell the police I did it within the week, he'd burn my house down too. Have you told the police this? Lucy shook her head. He told me if I went to the police, he'd also burn my house down. I don't understand. How am I supposed to go to the police and not go to the police at the same time? When was this? Laura chimed in. About 3 days ago, she sighed. Today I had the feeling someone was following me home from work. That's why when you knocked on my door, I was so nervous. I thought you may have been the guy on the phone. This is getting bad, Ned. Someone is behind all this, and they're trying to make Lucy take the fall for it. But why? It doesn't make any sense. If Christy takes the fall, the guy gets off scot-free. So why Lucy and not Christy? It shouldn't matter either way, right? The prairie dog rested his chin on his paw and thought. Laura could see the gears turning in his head. If anyone could puzzle this out, it would be him. Beneath her concern for the case, the young rabbit couldn't help but feel a wave of admiration for her friend. It was obvious. Now that Lucy had gotten involved in this mess, he was twice as motivated as before. Then, like a bolt of lightning, it hit her. I figured it out, she gasped, jumping to her feet. Ned looked at her in shock. What? You did? Well, no. I mean, I don't know who did it, but I know why he wants Lucy to take the fall. He's in love with Christy. How do you figure? Think about it. He calls the store to ask if Christy is working there. When the restaurant catches fire, Christy lost her job, so he wants Lucy to take the fall instead so she'd go back to the diner. Then, when she goes to ask for her job again, but doesn't get it, he gets upset and burns the restaurant down again. This time, Christy gets pegged for it and sent to jail, so now he's twice as desperate to shift the blame onto someone else. Why not come forward himself, then? If he cares about my sister so much, why not take the fall for her? Laura hopped from one paw to the other excitedly. Despite her concern for Ned's sister, she couldn't help but feel thrilled that she'd found the next lead in the case, because if it did, it'd prove he was behind the other arsons too, which means that... The prairie dog's eyes widened. He's been following Lucy this entire time. Lucy, whenever you've moved from the last few places, was there someone who moved with you? Maybe a coworker or a friend? The ram scratched behind her horn for a moment before shaking her head. I don't think so. If they did, I certainly didn't know about it. Darn, they must be disguising themselves, maybe faking their identity. Do you still have that recording, Lucy? Yeah, do you think you can help? Maybe. Right now, though, that recording will get my sister out of jail and put the police on alert. I know you're scared, but considering you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, it'd be better to tell the police about what happened. The timid woman scratched her horn in thought before nodding in surrender. I guess you have a point. I'll bring it to them first thing in the morning. This time, as the two teens stood to leave, the ram moved and gave them both a big hug. While Laura didn't mind, Ned squirmed uncomfortably in her woolly grip. Thank you both so much. You have no idea how nervous I've been. Don't mention it, Ned grunted, breaking free from her embrace and straightening his clothes. Anyway, maybe you should call in for the next day or two, just until this whole matter is settled. If he called you at home, he may know your schedule, too. Try to throw him off, you know. Thank you again. Good night, you two. Waving farewell to her, they walked down her stoop as Laura's phone rang. Thinking it was Rocky and Ashley, she answered it. Hey guys, she greeted. Go ahead and get out of there. We're heading back to base. For a moment, there wasn't a reply. Laura's ears twitched as the unsettling feeling came back to her gut. A voice came through the line, almost like sandpaper in its roughest. Mind your own business. This is your only warning, Laura. If you keep sticking your nose into this, I will kill you and everyone you care about. The rabbit's blood ran cold. She never felt so much anger and malice from another person before. Ned gave her a perplexed look, noticing the fear in her eyes. Who are you? Stay away from my friends. I swear, if you hurt them, I'll... There was a raspy cackle over the line, cutting her off. Laura knew now this wasn't some run-of-the-mill bad guy. This wasn't some misunderstood spirit or a person who was unaware of their actions. Every sound he made was laced with pure, unbridled evil. This was the devil. Trying to not cry from the weight of it all, Laura covered her mouth with her paw. The line clicked, leaving nothing more than a hollow dial tone that gave the finality of what had occurred. Laura, what's the matter? Ned asked. The rabbit couldn't speak. She tried her hardest to answer, but every time her mouth opened, she felt choked up. Tears were starting to stream down her cheeks just as both of her friends came rushing out of the alleyway. Oh, thank God you're okay, she cried, wrapping her arms around them. Rocky seemed surprised by the sudden gesture, but Ashley slipped out of her embrace. Everyone, we need to leave now, the cat stated firmly. Will someone please tell me what's going on? The prairie dog demanded. No time, she snapped. Let's go to my house, Laura suggested. It will be safe there. The club raced off down the street and didn't stop until they reached the front door. As all four came bursting inside, Laura's mother looked up from her coffee in surprise. Oh, Laura, I didn't realize you were inviting guests over. Yeah, sorry, Mom. We're just going to go hang out upstairs in my room for a bit, she promised, shoving the three up the stairs. It wasn't until they were in the safety and privacy of her room that the entire group took a collective breath. Will someone please tell me why we just ran all the way here? Ned wheezed, out of breath from their jog. You'll never believe it, Rocky panted. Ned gave him an irritable glare. Try me. So, Rocky was trying to break into the apartment like we planned to search for the evidence, the petite feline started. And then the trash can right next to me just exploded, like spontaneous garbage combustion. Not just a little fire either, like a freaking volcano. So he's been watching us, Ned growled. God, this jerk is tap dancing circles around us. There's more, Laura whispered. The entire group looked at her. Tears threatened to emerge as she tried to compose herself. He knows who we are. He knows we've been investigating him. He called my cell phone. The floodgates shattered. Salty drops came pouring down her cheeks as the fear finally overwhelmed her. Everything she'd endured for the past week all came crashing over her head. Sinking to her knees, she sobbed uncontrollably, her shoulders rising and falling. Going over to Laura, Ned knelt down beside her and took her paws in his. Sniffling, she raised her gaze to look into his eyes. He tried to give her a reassuring smile, but it did little to help. I'm sorry, Ned. I'm trying so hard to do this right, but I'm scared and things keep falling apart. I can't lead this team. I don't know how you do all of this. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Without even looking over his shoulder at the rest of the club, he said, Can you give Laura and me some privacy for a moment? Privacy? Why? Rocky asked, before Ashley just punched him in the shoulder before jerking her thumb at the door. Rubbing his arm tenderly, he followed the cat out, if only to avoid being punched again. When the door closed behind them, Ned continued, Do you need to step away from this case, Laura? I can't do that, Ned. I mean, Christy needs help, and even if I wanted to... That's not what I asked. Do you need to step away from this case? When we faced down Nathan, I knew some of our cases would put us in danger. If that's something that you can't do, for whatever reason, I will not think less of you for stepping back. You can still be part of the club. You can come on investigations with us. But if right here, right now, you feel in your heart that you have to move away, then I want you to do it. Understand? No, I don't understand. I care about you, Laura. I care about you a lot. It's difficult to say how much you mean to me. When I first tried to hear Judgment's song, I thought my calling was to protect you. I know now it's not just you, but everyone. That doesn't change that you are one of my top priorities. I know you're probably scared. I am too. The difference between us is you still have a family. The only one I have is my sister, and right now she's safe in prison. If you need to keep yours safe by cutting ties with this case, then do it. Don't you dare get you or your family hurt for my sake. The rabbit's nose twitched for a moment as she considered his offer. He was giving her a free pass. She could stop investigating. Her mother and grandmother wouldn't be in danger. The tape would exonerate Ned's sister, and everyone would be happy. So what if they didn't catch this guy? He'd move to some other town and become someone else's problem. How badly Laura wanted that to be the end of things, but she knew the truth. Only one person could end this. No, she murmured. It's not my family I'm worried about. My concern is for everyone else. He knows where you live. He could have burned down your house with Ashley and I both inside of it. This isn't just about Christy anymore. This guy's a threat to all of us. The rabbit paused for a moment before sighing. I'm sorry, Ned. There's something I need to confess to you. If we're going to get through this, I need to come clean. I'm listening. Bowing her head, the rabbit uttered her secret. I stole your memories. What? Immediately Laura began to babble out excuses, trying to justify her actions. I gave them back, though, I swear. My grandmother took my dad from me, and Mom said if I didn't take the memories of my powers from you, she'd take them all away completely. I went to return them, but she was going to wipe away all of your memories and personality, and I couldn't lose you like that. There was an awkward pause between the two until Ned's mouth curled into a grin. Baffled by the strange reaction, Laura tried to piece together what he was thinking. You may have just found the solution to our arsonist. Alright. We'll do one more chapter and then call it for tonight. Alright. So, we're on to chapter 12. I hope you guys have been enjoying it so far. I thought it might be interesting to kind of throw in a good old-fashioned red herring, which is why Lucy is within the story. So let's see if you guys can figure out who it is and who done it. The rabbit shook her head fervently. No, absolutely not. Come on, Laura, this is the best bet we have. If we throw him in prison, he'll just burn the place down around him and be free again. The only way to stop him is to prevent him from ever being able to use his powers again. She didn't like this plan. In fact, she hated it from the bottom of her heart. It was bad enough just having powers, but using them like this on another person was unethical. More than unethical, it was, well, just really, really bad. Do you remember how you felt when I forced you to sit down? That was me controlling your mind by accident. I already feel guilty about that. What you're asking is too much of me. At first, he opened his mouth to protest, but after seeing her expression, he thought better about it. You're right. If you don't want to, I won't try to force you. We need a plan, though. I've got one, Ashley suddenly blurted as she burst in. We find this guy, get the drop on him, and pummel his brains out. Ashley, Laura chastised, were you eavesdropping? More like making sure Rocky wasn't eavesdropping, she swore. Anyway, I heard someone suggest taking the offensive and giving this guy the beating of a lifetime. You suggested that, Ashley, and no, it's too dangerous. No, she's actually got a point. We don't have many options, Ned interjected. We find him and hit him hard enough that he doesn't get back up again. Seriously, Ned? You too? Rocky came back in with a sigh. Why do I get the feeling you guys are keeping me out of the loop? He's an arsonist. Why don't we just show his number to the police along with Lucy's evidence? Then we can have him thrown in jail. Everyone shifted nervously. You are keeping me out of the loop. First you didn't tell me that Ned's sister was the prime suspect, and now you're keeping other stuff from me? Come on, guys. I'm part of this team, too. Oh, we were worried you'd run away scared, Ashley countered. I didn't run away from the ghost. The ghost couldn't set you on fire with its mind. This guy can set fires with his mind? Rocky cried in shock. Immediately, all three members hushed him so Laura's mother wouldn't hear him. Sorry, but seriously, if that's the case, then we're kind of out of our league here. We can't exactly just kill the guy. Unless Ned has some magic powers that can shut off his powers, we're screwed. All eyes went to Laura. The rabbit knew for herself it was time to tell him. No secrets, she swore. To protect the team, she had to be completely open. Not Ned, she murmured. Me. Laura, you don't have to, Ned began. No, Rocky's right. He's part of this team, and we need to trust him. Rocky, what I'm about to tell you is a major secret, understand? Nobody can find out about this. You can't write it in an article. You can't even breathe a word of this to anyone. A word of what? What's going on? Somehow, this wasn't how the young rabbit pictured this going. She'd hoped she could keep this a secret from him forever, if for no reason other than to have at least one person think she was normal. I have psychic powers, she murmured. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Soon, however, he cracked up laughing. Okay, guys, not bad. You almost had me. But seriously, psychic powers? You'll have to do better than that. She's not joking, Ned said. Fine, I'll bite. If you're really psychic, Laura, what are next week's lottery numbers? Ashley slapped him across the back of his head. She's not that kind of psychic, idiot. Wait, are you? No, look, this is why I didn't want to tell anyone. I just want to be seen as normal, okay? I just get little hunches is all. I can sometimes see things in different places. Or sometimes when I'm dreaming, I can leave my body. Okay, how does that help us with the guy who lights fires with his mind? Excuse me. The question made Laura's ears droop. It seemed that nothing would be allowed to stay secret for her now. Because I can enter someone's mind and remove their memories. That's what Ned's original plan was. Have me enter the bad guy's head and take away the memories of his powers. Not that I don't trust you, Laura, but how do you know you can do that? Rocky pointed out. I mean, I doubt you've ever been able to do this before. Every question Rocky asked dug a little deeper into her, making her feel guilty for what she'd done to Ned. The prairie dog squeezed her paw comfortingly, pulling her out of the gloom. She can do it, he assured. That's all you need to know. But I can understand if you don't want to, Laura. If you don't, then we'll just figure out something else. First things first, it's getting late. My house is already compromised. Ashley, Rocky, you two head home, but be discreet about it and check in when you get there. Tomorrow we'll go to the station with Lucy and get Christy out of jail. Then we'll figure out who's behind this mess. The group filed out one by one, with Ashley and Rocky taking off down the street in different directions. Laura's paw rested on Ned's shoulder so he would lag from going back inside. Listen, Ned, thank you for not being upset with me over this whole memory thing. I still feel awful about it all. It just doesn't feel right tinkering around in someone's head. The club president flashed her a sympathetic smile. Laura, I know we've only known each other for a couple of weeks, but I know you well enough to know that you have a kind heart. You wouldn't mess with my head for your own gain. It's just not the sort of thing that Laura I know would do. Relief flooded over her in tidal waves. Thank goodness. I didn't want you to not trust me anymore. It'd be difficult to make me lose faith in you. Don't worry about it. The more you obsess over it, the more it's going to suffocate you. His words brought a grin to her face before she realized that something he said had triggered the echo of a memory. Wait. Running to her backpack, she began sifting through its contents. The prairie dog moved to her side. You've thought of something, he noted. What's running through that head of yours? Suffocation, she stated, pulling out their science homework and presented it to him. 3 things that fire needs to live. Air, heat, and fuel. If any of them aren't present, fire can't exist. Right, what's your point? Somehow I doubt you'd approve of us strangling the guy until he passes out. I know I'm personally against it. Not like that, but there's another way. The big walk-in freezers in the restaurant are airtight to make sure the cold can't get out. If we corner him in one, he won't be able to set a fire in it without suffocating himself. Ned clapped his paws in excitement. Great work, Laura. We lure him into a freezer, shut the door behind him, stack the evidence against the door, and wait for the police to arrive. The wide grin he wore slowly faded. Wait, that handles how we capture him, but not how we contain him. The police aren't going to believe us when we say he can light fires with his mind. They can't keep him in an airtight container forever, either. Laura knew Ned was right. There wasn't much else that could be done except for her to use her powers. I'll do it, she murmured. Do what? I'll take away the memories of his powers. Once he passes out, I'll go into the freezer and enter his mind. The prairie dog shook his head in disapproval. Laura, you don't have to do this. I mean, you have to actually go inside of the guy's brain. He's a deranged lunatic. Who knows what that could do to you? What other choice do we have? What if we found someone more powerful? Someone who could shield themselves from him while removing his memories? The rabbit's ears perked curiously. Outside help? You know someone who's dealt with this before? I don't know if she's done it with a pyrokinetic before, but you yourself said she's done it with me. The color faded from Laura's cheeks. Ned, no, I'm not going to go ask Nana for help. She's already upset because I made her give back your memories. Imagine how angry she'll be when I make her get rid of someone else's. You know this is the only way to do this. I'm not going to let you put yourself in danger. All right, I'll ask her, she agreed. Wait here. It's better if you stay out of this. Creeping down the stairs, the young rabbit could hear her mother and grandmother speaking in the kitchen. Hovering around the corner, she listened intently to find the best moment to enter. Suddenly, her grandmother straightened. Come in, child, she instructed without even looking over her shoulder. The young rabbit meekly joined the older two at the table, sitting down and folding her hands in her lap. Laura, you know better than to eavesdrop, her mother lectured. Calm down, Catherine. Laura just arrived outside of the kitchen a moment ago. What can we do for you, sweetheart? I noticed two of your friends left. Is it safe to assume that Ned is still here? Yes, but we have a favor to ask. What's that, honey? Her mother asked. Actually, it's a request for Nana. We're working on a case and may be in over our heads. And you wish for your sweet granny to come bail you out? The rabbit nodded, her ears drooping. She could feel the upcoming rejection. I know I don't have a right to ask you, but this is really important. It's bad enough he's an arsonist, but he may also be a murderer. Murder? Arson? What trouble have you gotten yourself into? Her mother demanded. And so Laura began to relay the events of their investigation. While she talked, her grandmother was silent, only giving a slight nod of her head to show she was paying attention. Laura's mother, on the other hand, was livid. There was rage in Catherine's eyes, unlike any she had ever seen before. So you see, Nana, we need you to take away his memories. Not all of them, just the ones regarding his abilities. The tired old rabbit's lips curled upward as she slowly stood from her chair. I'm afraid I will not help you, Laura. This is an excellent lesson in why it is important to hone your own powers. As one of the major arcana, you— Enough! Catherine barked, interrupting Lenora. Laura, I specifically told you not to get involved in this nonsense. Do you realize the danger you put yourself in? The danger you put this family in? But, Mom, Do not talk back to me. I gave you a very specific instruction, and you disobeyed me. Mother, please handle this problem. And you, young lady, I don't want you to have anything to do with that club any more. That's not fair. Why are you being so horrible about this? There are people out there who need the club's help, and the club will just have to help them without you. This is the exact sort of stupid shenanigans that made me leave your father in the first place. The youngest rabbit was heartbroken by her mother's declaration. The club isn't stupid, she hiccuped, trying to hold back tears. We're helping people. People like Nathan and Christy. Catherine took her daughter's cheeks in her paws before speaking in a calm, collected tone. Laura, listen to me carefully. You are still a child. I took you away from this life to keep you out of danger, not so you could run back into it without an idea of what you're doing. Leave this matter to the police and your grandmother. From now on, you go to school and come straight home. No more investigating. No more club. Do you understand me? Tears streamed down Laura's face. She pulled away from her mother before giving a choked up, Yes, ma'am. With that, she ran upstairs to her room to cry into her pillow. It didn't go well then, I take it. Ned's voice caused her to perk up. She'd completely forgotten he was waiting in her room. As she looked at him, she saw a face full of grave concern. Mom says I have to quit the club, she grumbled. Why? It's too dangerous. We're just kids, so we should let the grown-ups handle it. It's not fair, Ned. This must have been exactly what my father felt like. He just wanted to help people, and that's all I want too. Why is it so wrong to want to help people? His paw gingerly rested on her back. Gentle pats and strokes, uncommon and deep and clearly uncomfortable for her friend, helped soothe Laura's frustration. At least a little. It's not wrong, Laura. And I get where your mom is coming from. This work is dangerous. Actually, I think she's right. We should give up on this case and let the adults handle this. Okay, so I know I said only one more chapter, but I feel like we should get through this one too, because it's actually really important. And I shouldn't have a bias, but it's one of my favorite chapters in the book, so I'm going to keep reading it anyway. Chapter 13. The rabbit was stunned. Was he giving up? She couldn't believe it. After everything they'd been through, the thought of Ned wanting to surrender didn't just upset Laura. It severely pissed her off. Jerking upright, she turned on her friend. How can you say that? You're the president of the club. No one, and I mean no one, cares more than you do. Not only did you start the club, you brought us all together, and you just want to back out? It wasn't often that Laura became angry, but Ned's assertion made her furious. Her blood boiled and there was fire in her eyes as she glared at her friend. This was not how the club was going to end, not on her watch. No. Don't even think. Oh, I'm sorry. No, don't even think about it. I don't care what my mother says. I'm not quitting. These people need us, Ned. We're solving problems that the adults can't solve on their own. So, what can we do about it? We have the evidence to spring Christie, but like your mother said, we're just dumb kids. What's so special about us anyway? Seriously? No one knows more about ghosts than you do. Ashley has gold medals in every sport she plays, and think about all the information we've learned because Rocky was able to dig it up for us. Ned smirked. Yeah, so? There's no one else who could do what we do, and we're the best bet people like Lucy and your sister have. As she began to calm down from her anger, the rabbit realized then that she'd been tricked. She'd covered her face with her paws. I can't believe you. You really had me going. Grabbing her pillow, she hurled it at him, striking him in the nose. I thought you were seriously going to disband the club. Ned Gunnison, sometimes you are more trouble than you're worth. Just don't forget our roles, huh? I'm the grumpy one, remember? You're supposed to be the peppy, upbeat one, he said, pointing to each in turn. When Laura didn't respond, Ned moved to sit beside her and nudged her with his elbow. You just need to be reminded of your passion for the club. We'll get through this, Laura, just like we did before. But for now, let's focus on the real problem at hand. Our arsonist. Laura nodded. Right. Grandma said she could wipe his memory from afar, but I'm not strong enough to do it myself. I'll need to be close, and to do that, we need to find a way to protect ourselves. Awesome. How do we do that? My grandmother's diary. It's how I learned to take your memories. Maybe it'll teach me how to shield us, too. The color faded from Laura's cheeks. Realizing her predicament, she gave a low groan. But the book is at your house. I hid it between the cushions when Ashley came over, and in the excitement I forgot all about it. Then let's go get it. Right now? It's nearly 10 o'clock. Ned shrugged. May as well take the time we have, he offered, walking over to her window and sliding it open. No point in upsetting your mom further. We'll go through the window. Sneak out? Ned, my mom won't even notice we're gone. It's just out there, down the road and back, not even 10 minutes. Come on, Laura. The White Rabbit watched him crawl out of her window and onto the first-story roof before turning back to offer her his paw. For a moment, Ned's face shifted. Something about him changed that she couldn't explain. It was the same thing she'd encountered when they first met. She didn't see a young prairie dog anymore. Now, before her was the weathered face of an older prairie dog who'd seen many things and gone on many adventures. He smiled at her, the light of affection twinkling in his eyes. The first time this vision occurred to her, she'd been able to write it off as herself being tired, a simple trick of the mind from having searched for so long to find Nathan, only to come up empty until she met Ned. Now, however, she knew precisely what the premonition meant. The message was so loud it came to her like the clanging crash of a gong in her chest. This was still Ned, but one she'd known for a lifetime. It was a lifetime that she spent with him, and it was a lifetime she wouldn't trade for anything. Laura's knees felt weak. She knew then, without a shadow of a doubt, that she was in love. Finally, in a blink, she was staring back at her friend, still in high school, but with the same affectionate gaze. This was it, Laura realized. Others simply stumbled upon their destiny, but she was being given a choice, here and now. Stay, and her life would be the same as it always was. Perhaps in time her powers would fade from her. She'd grow old and live contently, but she would also always wonder what would happen if she'd gone with him instead. If she went with him, though, it'd be the story of a lifetime. When she compared the two, there wasn't even a contest. She took his paw, a big smile coming to her face. There would be no regrets in her life. They'd go on exciting adventures, find things that terrified her and left her in wonder. There were many words for their relationship between her and Ned. Star-crossed lovers, bound by fate, destined to be together. Laura called them soulmates. As he helped her through the window, Laura contemplated telling him about her epiphany. However, something told her that now was not the time. He'd discover it on his own, eventually. But today, being friends would have to do, and it was a compromise she eagerly accepted. Together, they carefully jumped from the roof to a nearby tree before climbing their way down to the street and off into the night. When the two burst into Ned's house, their chests heaved from the amount of effort they'd exerted. Neither of them stopped sprinting the entire way, on the off chance that their suspect had decided to follow them. Immediately, Laura rushed to the couch, pulling the cushions upward to find the small leather-bound diary. Flipping through the pages, her eyes scanned the words in search of anything that could help her. Finally, she came to a stop on a section marked Auras. Here, she showed the book to her friend. Do you know anything about these? Auras? I guess so. I always just kind of counted it as a bunch of phooey, like crystal healing, you know. The rabbit had to stifle a giggle. Wow, something that even Ned doesn't believe in. Never imagined you being a skeptic. Everyone needs something to not believe in, he joked. He flipped the page, scanning more of the book's contents. Okay, so according to this book, you create auras by focusing your spirit. She nodded, though in truth Laura didn't know what that meant. Aura, spirit? The words were familiar, but their physical meanings were lost on her. Ned, however, managed to see right through her. Well, I mean, it's like... so imagine there's this light inside of you. It's warm and calm. He tried to explain, but it seemed confusing even for him. Look, your aura is basically the feelings you put off. Control your feelings, you control your aura. Do you really think that would work? How would I know? I'm a nerd, not a mystic. The rabbit frowned, but tried her best to control her emotions. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, she closed her eyes tightly and tried to focus on her inner light. Deep breaths trailed in and out of her lungs, and soon an image formed in her mind. It was the room she and Ned were in. She could see it as if her eyes were open, yet she knew that she hadn't opened them. Her friend appeared out of focus, a fuzzy outline around his body like a halo. He consisted of a simple, vague shape that she recognized as Ned solely because, well, she wasn't positive how she knew exactly. Reaching out with her paw, she tried to touch him, and as she did, a similarly fuzzy light seemed to stretch out from her fingertips. Curiously, she placed her other paw upward, and like pulling apart a large sheet, she formed a wall between her and Ned. Ned? She said, curious if he could hear her. I'm here, Laura. Is it working? I don't know. There's a wall between us. Can you try to touch it? The fuzzy figure moved forward, but he simply phased through the wall. Like this? Like this? You passed right through it, she sighed. I'm sorry, Ned. Stooping down, he picked up the book and began to read again. It says here that the color of your aura changes its function. What color is it now? Pink. The fluttering of pages filled her ears. Her friend cleared his throat nervously. It, says pink shields don't work on friends. The one you want is white. It will protect you against attack, according to the diary, anyway. The rabbit thought about it for a moment. Something was welling up inside of her, something powerful. Wait a minute, I think I can... Her aura began to swirl around her, forming a solid bubble that was expanding outward. It passed through Ned, growing larger and larger. As he phased through, she could see him coming into sharper focus. His eyes were wide, and Laura felt something stirring in her heart. The way she felt was unlike anything she'd experienced before. His presence was there, of course, but it was far more personal than that. His aura only seemed to blend into hers. Concentrating on that sensation, she pushed her bubble out further and further. The diary in Ned's paw fell to the ground, its pages fluttering rapidly from the force of her powers. Then, something happened. Terror lanced through Laura's chest. The world shifted into ruins, just like in Ned's dream. His house began to twist and groan, distorting into a horrible version of reality. Ned? Ned! Laura cried. Something's happening. Help me! Laura! Sinister laughing filled her ears. She knew that insane cackle the moment she heard it. It was him, the devil. You honestly think this flimsy bubble of yours will keep me out? The voice came as a loud roar, like a tornado that screamed the words directly into her head. You're nothing to me, Laura. You and all of your friends will burn. Visions flooded her mind. The world around her was on fire. Fear gripped her mind, and she could see shapes moving in the orange flames. Oh God, please, no. The shapes were the charred corpses of the club, shambling towards her like zombies. Laura. Ned's blackened husk groaned, paws outstretched. No, stay back, she screamed. Stay away from me. This isn't real. You're not real. Despite her claim, the ghoulish vision extended its paws, grasping her shoulders. Soon he was on her, exhaling ash and soot. Laura began to choke on the dust, trying hard to escape as he violently shook her. Laura! Laura! The cries of his dead body grew louder until finally something else pierced the nightmare. Laura, snap out of it! She felt an icy splash soak her face. Immediately she sat up with a gasp of air from where she lay on the ground. Standing over her with the glass was Ned. his heart racing and panic clear in his eyes. Jumping to her feet, she threw her arms around him. "Oh, Ned, it was horrible," she sobbed. "It was him. It was that monster. He killed you, and he, he made you hate me, and—" "Calm down. It's okay," her friend assured her. "We're safe, see? No fire, no burns, just the two of us. If he was around here, Ashley would have called, right? See, she's right there." He pointed out the window, indicating the lit bedroom of his neighbor. "Ned, we're out of our league here. This isn't like Nathan. Whoever this is, he's beyond evil." The pallid girl trembled in his arms. "He doesn't just want to kill us. He wants to torture us. He wants us to suffer. We can't fight him. Please, please don't ask me to do this. I beg of you, please." Tears were streaming down her face. Once again the rabbit found solace in his embrace. His paw awkwardly patted her back to let her know he was still there. While Laura could sense this was making him uncomfortable, the horrifying experience made it difficult for her to care. Right now, all she wanted was to be held. Having finally calmed down, Laura stepped away from Ned, wiping her eyes with her paw. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I know you were counting on me." "Laura, don't apologize. No one blames you for being scared of this guy." "Yes, you do. I know you do. I have psychic powers, so I'm the only one who can beat him. If I don't, then he's just going to hurt more people. Christy may even go to prison because I can't help catch the bad guy." "That's enough," Ned suddenly boomed, his voice growing cold. "God, how the hell do you do this?" "What?"
"Being a supportive person is so exhausting. I mean, come on, Laura. I am trying here, I really am, but you have to get a grip."
Ned began pacing, trying to calm himself down. He was not very successful.
"This isn't some end-all be-all destroyer of worlds we're dealing with. It's one guy. Yeah, it's a guy with psychic powers, but he's still one guy and there are four of us."
The rabbit was shocked by his declaration. "You mean this entire time you've been pretending?" Ned ran his paws through his fur in irritation.
"What happened to the Laura I first met, huh? Where's the rabbit who stared down a poltergeist without flinching? That's the Laura I want to talk to, not this wishy-washy paranoid—" He paused, trying to come up with the right word. "Coward. I'd expect this behavior from Rocky, but Laura, you're better than this. You're going to give up after that pep talk you gave me in your room?"
"But the devil—"
"But the devil nothing," he gasped in exasperation. "Newsflash, Laura, he doesn't want to be caught. He'd prefer to go about his life burning down buildings as he pleases. But if he really wanted to kill us, don't you think he'd have done it by now?"
"Well, Ned was prepared to not give her any ground in this argument. Once more he cut her off.
"You're smarter than this, Laura. This is Supernatural 101. When a ghost or entity wants you to leave it alone, what does it do? Don't answer the question, just think for a second. When Nathan wanted bullies to leave you alone, how did he get them to do it?"
The timid rabbit's ears drooped on either side of her head. Laura knew that Ned was, in a sense, right. Despite the rude pointed delivery, he made valid points. "What if you're wrong, Ned?" she finally uttered. "What if we get to that final showdown, and with the snap of his fingers he turns us all into ash?" Rubbing his temples, Ned tried desperately to keep his cool. Laura couldn't believe she hadn't noticed the prairie dog's stress rising before. The fact that he hid it so well was terrifying.
"I'm not denying these things aren't dangerous. On the contrary, I'm well aware of how dangerous they are, but it's because they're so dangerous that we have to stop him. Right now, He stopped talking abruptly as his eyes widened. It took the rabbit. It was a look the rabbit knew all too well. "You figured it out. You know how to stop him." "Not quite. I'm thinking through a crazy idea and it's falling into place. I think I know what our arson's motive is, and it's not good. The only upside is I'm relatively certain that he doesn't have any control over his powers."
All right. And that's chapter 14, and that's where we're going to call it for tonight. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the stream. I hope that you've been enjoying it. Um, I'm trying to get better about reading and doing voices and things like that. I noticed on some of my old streams when I'd rewatch them that I was very quiet, so I'm kind of trying to push the boundaries of volume. I want to be loud enough that I'm clear, that you guys can hear me whenever I'm reading, but also quiet enough that I'm not bothering my roommate upstairs while he's trying to sleep. Um, I told him that if I ever did get too loud, he could just send me a text message and basically telling me to shut up and I'd have it, but he hasn't sent me one yet, so far I think we're all good. that being said, thank you guys again for tuning in for this. I'm glad if you've been enjoying it. Be sure to send it to your friends, share it around. Find people other than that who may want something to watch whenever they're suffering from insomnia, or if you're on the other side of the world and it's your morning or whatever, you know, that's fine too. I really hope that you guys kind of enjoy it. Um, if you haven't yet, give me a follow because every follow helps. It's free. You don't gotta pay any money for it, but it'd be nice to have people who watch and regularly come in. Thank you guys again so much for supporting me, and I really appreciate you helping me out with this hobby. Um, Next week on Wednesday, we're going to have a stream for our first session of the rebranded D&D on our new Twitch channel, which is Alder Fox Adventures. Uh, / Alder Fox Adventures. You can follow that link right there, and it'll take you to the channel. Go ahead and give them a follow as well. They're great people. Um, we're really, really excited about this rebrand. It's going to be awesome. That being said, thank you guys so much for joining me once more, and I greatly appreciate it. And I hope you all have a good night and get some sleep. Thank you very much.